Story 1. That summer was unusually hot, and after a long period of intense work, I couldn't wait to unwind in the comfort of my home. All I wanted was to relax, catch up on some shows, and maybe even tackle a few home improvement projects. What I didn't expect was for my peaceful haven to be invaded in a way that left me feeling deeply unsettled. It all started on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon. I was settled in with a cup of coffee, ready to work on my laptop. Recently, the Wi-Fi at my house had been spotty, so I decided to check the router settings to see if something was off. When I logged into the admin page, I noticed a few unfamiliar devices connected to my network. At first, I assumed it was a glitch or maybe a neighbor's device accidentally connecting, but something told me I should dig a little deeper. As I reviewed the connected devices, I found a list of strange IP addresses and device names that didn't match anything I owned. My curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to investigate further. That's when I made a chilling discovery. Later that day, while browsing on my computer, I found an unfamiliar file on my desktop. It had a random string of numbers and letters in its name, and I couldn't figure out where it came from. My gut told me something was wrong, so I opened it. Inside were detailed logs of my internet activity. The logs showed the websites I had visited, how long I stayed on each, and even specific search terms I'd used. My heart raced. It was clear someone had been watching me in real time, monitoring my every move online. As I combed through the logs, I saw everything: work-related searches, personal browsing habits, even private emails. It was no accident. Someone had intentionally invaded my privacy, and the thought of it sent a chill down my spine. I immediately began checking for signs of further tampering. I ran antivirus scans, but nothing came up. It seemed the intruder had been careful, covering their tracks, but the evidence left on my computer was undeniable. I had to take action. I called my internet service provider to report the suspicious activity. They assured me they'd investigate and advised me to change all my passwords and secure my Wi-Fi network with stronger encryption. I also reached out to a local cybersecurity expert, who came to my home, ran diagnostics, and confirmed there had been unauthorized connections. Together, we set up more robust security measures, including a new router with advanced protection features. In the days that followed, I became hyper-aware of my digital security. I installed extra antivirus software, used a VPN, and constantly monitored my network for suspicious activity. But despite these measures, I still felt exposed. Eventually, my ISP identified the unauthorized access point. Someone had exploited a weakness in my network security to monitor my online activity. While they secured my connection, the identity of the intruder remained a mystery. The experience left me shaken. I had always assumed my online privacy was protected, but this invasion shattered that illusion. It made me realize how vulnerable we all are in the digital age. As a result, I became more vigilant about my online safety, using stronger passwords, enabling two-factor authentication, and being cautious about what I shared online. Though I secured my network and information, the memory of the breach lingered, a constant reminder of how easily our private lives can be exposed in this increasingly connected world. Story 2. It all began with something small, a detail I initially dismissed as a minor inconvenience. For a few weeks, I noticed my car seemed to be parked in slightly different spots in the lot when I left work in the evening. I shrugged it off, thinking it was just my mind playing tricks on me. After all, I parked in a large lot with many cars, so it made sense that I might be misremembering my exact spot. But then the pattern continued. Over the next few days, I noticed that my car was often parked several spaces away from where I had left it. At first, I brushed it off, but soon it was happening so often that it made me uneasy. One day, I arrived to find my car not just a little out of place, but in an entirely different row. My anxiety spiked. I scanned the lot but didn't see anything unusual. That's when I decided I needed to investigate further. The next morning, I arrived at work early, hoping to catch something suspicious. And sure enough, I saw a person approach my car. They glanced around nervously before getting in and moving it a short distance to a different spot. Panic set in. Someone was moving my car, but why? What were they after? That evening, I approached my car with a heightened sense of urgency, looking for any signs of tampering. That's when I found it, a small black device attached to the underside of the rear bumper. It had a blinking light. My heart raced as I realized it was a GPS tracker. I carefully removed the device and inspected it. It was a standard tracking device, with no identifying information. The realization that someone had been monitoring my movements left me feeling exposed and vulnerable. I took the tracker to the police, who were concerned but didn't have any immediate answers. They took the device as evidence and assured me they would investigate. The officer explained that GPS trackers were used for a range of purposes, from benign monitoring to more sinister intentions. While they investigated, I took extra precautions, installing a car alarm with motion sensors and documenting any unusual events. A week later, the police informed me that they had analyzed the tracker, but there were no leads. They confirmed it had been used to track my movements over time, but beyond that, there was no identifying information. The investigation had hit a dead end. I continued to stay alert, varying my routines and parking in different areas when I could. The disturbances seemed to become less frequent, but I remained cautious. Though the mystery of the tracker was never solved, the experience taught me valuable lessons about personal security. Knowing someone had been watching me was a stark reminder of the vulnerabilities that come with modern technology and the need to protect my privacy. Story 3. On a chilly autumn afternoon, I decided it was finally time to tackle the attic. I'd moved into the house several months ago, but between work and settling in, it had been left untouched. With the colder weather setting in, I figured it was the perfect opportunity to sort it out and make the space more usable for storage. The attic was accessed through a narrow, steep staircase that led to a dusty, cluttered space beneath the eaves. It was dimly lit by a single overhead bulb, casting a soft glow over the neglected items. As I began sorting through old furniture, boxes, and miscellaneous belongings left behind by the previous owner, I stumbled upon a large, dusty box tucked away in the corner. Curious, I opened it. As the lid lifted, a cloud of dust escaped, momentarily blurring my vision. Inside the box were old photographs, letters, and keepsakes, personal items from a past long forgotten. The photographs, mostly black and white, captured moments from decades ago, featuring a woman with dark curly hair and a man dressed in what seemed to be 1940s attire. They were pictured at garden parties, family gatherings, and even what appeared to be a small wedding. Among the photos was a stack of handwritten letters, tied together with a ribbon. I picked up the first one, addressed to a Margaret. The elegant handwriting spoke of deep affection from someone named Thomas, who was clearly in love with her. As I read more letters, each one revealed more of their lives, dreams, struggles, and everyday moments. One letter described a birth announcement, while another conveyed frustration over being apart during a difficult time. The box also contained trinkets, a locket with a photo inside, a small wooden music box that played a haunting melody, and vintage postcards from various locations. Each item seemed to hold a piece of the past, a snapshot of lives once lived within these very walls. I couldn't help but wonder who Margaret and Thomas were, what happened to them, and why their belongings were left behind. The next day, I visited the local historical society with the photographs and letters, hoping to learn more. The archivist confirmed that Margaret and Thomas were part of the town's history. Thomas had been a local businessman, and Margaret had been active in charitable organizations. Their love story was one of devotion, but it was also marked by tragedy. Thomas had died young, and Margaret had carried on with a heavy heart. With this new information, I returned home with a deep sense of connection to the past. The discovery of Margaret and Thomas's belongings transformed how I saw the house. It was no longer just a building, it was a repository of memories. I carefully preserved the items to prevent further damage and placed a small plaque in the attic, honoring their place in the history of the house. Every time I went into the attic, I thought of Margaret and Thomas. Their story had become intertwined with the walls of my home, and their memory was a reminder that every house holds stories within its walls, stories that sometimes take a little digging to uncover. Story 4. The decision to change my phone number came after a series of increasingly intrusive calls and messages. My old number had been in circulation for years, and over time, it attracted its fair share of spam and harassment. The breaking point came when I received a string of unsettling texts from an anonymous number. The messages, which hinted at personal details about my life, were threatening. It was clear that I needed to sever ties with my old number and start fresh. The process of changing my number was straightforward. I contacted my service provider, explained the situation, and requested a new number. The customer service representative was understanding and assured me that everything would be taken care of. Within hours, I had a new number and felt a sense of relief, hoping that the harassment would stop. At first, everything seemed to be going well. I updated my contacts, notified friends and family, and felt hopeful. But just as I began to relax, my new number started receiving alarming and threatening messages. The first came within hours of activating the new number. You think changing your number will help? I know where to find you. My heart raced. I had expected a brief adjustment period, but this immediate response was deeply unsettling. At first, I dismissed it, thinking it was just a coincidence or perhaps a prank. But the messages kept coming. They grew more specific, mentioning a location I frequented and suggesting I wouldn't be safe if I continued to visit. Another message referred to a recent purchase I had made, indicating that the sender was keeping tabs on my life. Despite having just received my new number, I felt vulnerable and anxious. How could someone have my new number so quickly? I contacted my phone service provider again, explaining the situation. They assured me that no leaks or breaches had occurred on their end. Next, I reached out to the authorities, providing them with copies of the threatening messages. They promised to investigate and advised me to keep records of all communications and avoid sharing personal information. In the meantime, I took steps to protect myself. I changed all my passwords, set up two-factor authentication on my accounts, and installed a call blocking app to filter out unknown numbers. But despite these measures, the harassment continued. The messages grew more desperate and erratic, even threatening physical harm and mentioning specific dates and times when I would be in danger. This constant barrage of threats took a toll on my mental health. I became hypervigilant, avoiding familiar places and constantly scanning my surroundings for signs of danger. My sense of security was shattered, and I struggled to maintain a normal routine amidst the anxiety. The authorities kept me updated as they investigated. They worked to trace the messages and identify the sender, but the use of anonymous communication methods made it a challenging task. Over time, the messages tapered off, and eventually stopped altogether. Though the relief of no longer being harassed was immense, the experience left lasting emotional scars. It taught me valuable lessons about digital privacy, security, and resilience. I became more cautious about sharing personal information and learned the importance of being proactive in safeguarding it. The ordeal also highlighted the need for support systems when facing invasive threats. In the end, the harassment stopped, but the fear of being watched or tracked lingered. The experience was a stark reminder of the vulnerabilities we face in an increasingly connected world, and the importance of staying vigilant in protecting our safety and privacy. Story 5. The days after my surgery were meant to be a time for recovery, but they quickly descended into confusion and concern. The procedure had been routine, a minor surgery to resolve a long-standing issue. The hospital staff had been professional, and I had no reason to believe anything would go wrong. The first few days after I returned home, I followed all the aftercare instructions, taking my medications and attending follow-up appointments. Everything seemed fine until I received an unexpected call from my primary care physician's office. The nurse on the other end sounded unusually concerned. "We've noticed some discrepancies in your medical record," she said. "Can you come in for a review?" Confused and a little alarmed, I agreed to come in. When I arrived at the clinic, Dr. Adams, my primary care physician, looked unusually tense. He explained that after reviewing my medical files, they had found several discrepancies. Medications and treatments listed didn't match what had been discussed, and some notes from my surgery were missing or incorrect. It hit me hard. If my records had been tampered with, it could affect my health. I thought back to the symptoms I had been experiencing after the surgery, unusual side effects that didn't align with what I had been told to expect. Dr. Adams suggested we conduct a thorough review of my treatment and update my records. He also recommended additional tests to ensure the changes hadn't impacted my recovery. The following days were a whirlwind of appointments, tests, and consultations. It became clear that someone had altered key parts of my treatment plan, such as my medications and follow-up treatments. The investigation revealed that the changes had been made deliberately by someone with access to the hospital's electronic records. This breach made me feel violated and fearful for my health. The hospital took steps to correct the discrepancies in my records and implemented additional security measures to prevent future incidents. However, the damage had been done. I questioned the integrity of the systems designed to protect my health and privacy. The investigation eventually identified the employee responsible for the tampering. They had acted out of a misguided sense of authority, believing they were helping, but their actions had jeopardized my recovery. The employee faced disciplinary actions, and the hospital issued a public apology to the affected patients, reinforcing their commitment to data security. As I moved forward, I became more involved in discussions about patient privacy and the importance of robust security measures. The incident had shaken my trust in the medical system, but it also highlighted the need for vigilance in protecting sensitive personal information. My recovery was marked by a renewed awareness of the systems meant to safeguard us, and a commitment to ensuring such breaches wouldn't happen to others. Story 6. One Tuesday evening, I was enjoying the quiet of my living room when my phone rang, cutting through the peace. It was an unfamiliar number, and I hesitated before answering. The voice on the other end was distorted, almost as though it were coming through a poor connection or deliberately masked. "I have information about your family," the voice said in a calm but unnerving tone. The words were vague, and my unease grew as they mentioned personal details, medical appointments, job situations, and even some private matters. I felt a chill run down my spine. I tried to press the caller for more information, but they remained cryptic, warning me to be cautious. "They're watching," they said before the call abruptly ended. After the call, I immediately contacted my family, but they hadn't noticed anything unusual. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I contacted the authorities, but without concrete evidence, the investigation seemed like a daunting task. Over the next few weeks, I became hypervigilant about my family's safety, monitoring their routines and increasing security measures. I even hired a private investigator to look into any potential threats. Although no further calls came in, I noticed strange behavior from acquaintances and strangers who seemed overly interested in our lives. Despite all precautions, the authorities and investigator couldn't uncover anything substantial. Then, months later, I received another call. This time, the voice was clearer, and the warning more ominous: "You should have heeded my warnings. Things are about to change." The call ended abruptly, and once again, I was left with a sense of unease. The experience left a lasting impact on me and my family. Though we never discovered the identity or motives of the caller, the ordeal served as a reminder of the fragility of safety and the importance of being vigilant in protecting our privacy. The fear of the unknown lingered, but I learned the value of resilience and maintaining a heightened awareness even when faced with uncertainty. Story 7. It started as a normal day, sipping coffee and scrolling through my social media, when I noticed several messages from friends and family expressing concern. They had received strange messages from me, messages I hadn't written. Panic set in as I logged into my accounts. I discovered that someone had gained access to them and was sending threatening, aggressive messages to my contacts. The realization that my accounts had been compromised was deeply unsettling. I immediately changed all my passwords and enabled two-factor authentication. Despite my efforts to secure my accounts, the emotional toll was significant. I contacted friends and family to explain the situation, but the damage was already done. Some relationships were strained by the unexpected hostility in the messages. I contacted the support teams for each platform, reported the unauthorized activity, and started the slow process of regaining control. The authorities took my report seriously and advised me to keep detailed records of all the unauthorized communications. Over time, the hackers' activity diminished, and my accounts were restored. However, the experience left me feeling exposed and vulnerable. I became more educated on cybersecurity, attending workshops and learning about best practices to protect my online presence. Though the hacking incident was a harrowing experience, it served as a wake-up call. I learned the importance of safeguarding my personal information and shared this knowledge with others. The journey to recovery was challenging, but it ultimately reinforced the need for vigilance in an increasingly connected world. Story 8. It was an ordinary Tuesday morning when I first heard the voicemail. I was juggling my phone, a cup of coffee, and trying to get out the door on time for work. The voicemail alert was buried under a slew of other notifications, but something about it caught my attention. It was from an unknown number, and I hesitated before pressing play. The voice on the other end sent chills down my spine. "I know your routine," it began. "I see you leave for work every morning at 7:15. You stop by the coffee shop on Elm Street and then head to your office building." The details were too precise, too unsettling. "You think you're so predictable," the voice continued. "If you don't start paying attention, things are going to change, and not for the better." My stomach turned as I listened. The voicemail detailed my daily routine, everything from my coffee stop to my work schedule, and I felt a deep violation of my privacy. It was more than just an annoyance, it was an intrusion. The message ended abruptly, leaving me feeling vulnerable and terrified. Shocked, I replayed the voicemail, trying to fully grasp what I had just heard. The idea that someone had been watching me, tracking my every move, was deeply unsettling. My first instinct was to call the police, but fear gripped me. I didn't know who was behind the threat or how serious it was. After a deep breath to steady myself, I contacted the local police and shared the voicemail along with the details I could recall about my routine. The officers were sympathetic but explained that they needed more concrete evidence before they could take action. They advised me to be cautious and document any further suspicious activity. For days, I tried to maintain some semblance of normalcy, but the fear lingered. I changed my routine, varying my departure time, and took different routes to work. I even stopped going to my regular coffee shop, hoping to throw off any potential surveillance. But despite my efforts, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. One afternoon, I noticed someone lingering near my apartment building, though I couldn't get a good look at them. My anxiety began to affect my work and personal life, and I installed security cameras and motion-activated lights at home. Still, the calls and messages kept coming. Silent, blocked number calls served as constant reminders of the looming threat. One evening, as I was reviewing footage from my security cameras, I spotted a figure walking near my building, hooded and face obscured. While they didn't approach my apartment, seeing them in the footage heightened my fear. The breakthrough came when I received a text from an unknown number: "You're not as careful as you think. I know where you live." I took extra precautions after that, sometimes staying with friends or family, and sought therapy to help me manage the constant fear and anxiety. The police were able to trace some calls, but it didn't lead to a breakthrough. Eventually, the threatening messages and calls stopped. Though the fear never fully disappeared, the sense of immediate danger did. I learned the importance of vigilance, protecting my privacy, and the value of emotional resilience. The experience reshaped how I viewed personal safety, and while I had regained control over my life, the effects still linger. Story 9. It all started on a regular Saturday morning. I had just finished my coffee and was about to head out for a run when I noticed an envelope sticking out of my mailbox. It was plain, white, and had no return address, just my name written in a spidery, unfamiliar handwriting. Curiosity got the best of me, and I brought it inside to open it, thinking it might be a misplaced letter or marketing material. But instead, I found a series of documents that made my blood run cold. The first sheet was a detailed blueprint of my home, showing every room, every door, and even the layout of my backyard. It wasn't just a generic floor plan, there were handwritten notes in the margins, like a weak spot near the back door and frequent visits to the home office. Flipping the page, I found detailed maps of my neighborhood, with certain houses, including mine, circled and marked with arrows. Alongside the maps were notes outlining my daily routine, from my usual wake-up time to my gym schedule and grocery shopping habits. It was as though someone had been watching my every move. Panic hit me immediately. I ran through the house, checking doors and windows to make sure everything was secure. Though nothing seemed out of place, I felt completely violated. I had always taken extra precautions with my privacy, but this was beyond anything I could have prepared for. I took photos of the documents, made copies, and contacted the police. The officer who arrived took my situation seriously, asking about any recent conflicts or disputes. Unfortunately, the investigation moved slowly, and there were no clear leads in the documents. I installed additional security cameras, hired a neighborhood patrol, and started varying my routine to confuse whoever was watching me. But despite these efforts, the sense of dread lingered. Every time I checked my mailbox, I feared another envelope would arrive. 2 weeks later, another letter arrived, this time just a simple note: "You're being watched. Stay alert." It only deepened my anxiety, but it also motivated me to keep pressing the police for answers. I alerted my neighbors, who hadn't received any suspicious letters but agreed to be on the lookout. Then, a breakthrough came. One of my neighbors reported seeing someone acting suspiciously near the mailboxes. The description matched a local handyman who had worked in the neighborhood months before. The police tracked him down and discovered that he had been hired to gather information on me as part of a personal vendetta. The case was resolved when the handyman was apprehended and the person who hired him was identified and arrested. The experience left me shaken, but I was relieved that it was over. In the aftermath, I took steps to further reinforce my home's security and remain vigilant, knowing that such invasions could happen at any time. The case served as a stark reminder of how easily one's sense of safety can be shattered and the importance of acting quickly when privacy is compromised. Story 10. It was an evening that started off like any other. I had been invited to a friend's house for a casual get-together. We had known each other for years, and their home was always a welcoming place filled with laughter and good company. The evening unfolded without any surprises, with appetizers on the table, soft music in the background, and relaxed conversations. My friend Mark had recently installed a new security system in his home and was excited to show it off. He demonstrated how the cameras could monitor various parts of the house and be accessed remotely through an app. He and his wife, Lisa, were proud of the system, especially knowing they could keep an eye on things even when they weren't home. As the night went on, Lisa seemed particularly eager to show off the features, demonstrating how they could view live footage from different rooms on their phones and tablets. It was clear they were thrilled with their new setup, and we all enjoyed a wonderful evening of games, food, and laughter. But the next morning, things took a disturbing turn. I received a notification on my phone from a social media platform, with a message that included a link: "Watch the latest live footage from Mark's house, looks like the party was a blast." I clicked on the link, expecting some sort of joke, but instead, my blood ran cold. The link led to a live stream of footage from Mark's house, showing multiple areas of the home, including the spots where we had been socializing the night before. My heart raced as I realized someone had gained unauthorized access to Mark's security system. The footage of our private gathering was being streamed online. I immediately tried calling Mark, but his phone went straight to voicemail. Panicked, I drove back to his house, where I found Mark outside, visibly distressed. He confirmed that the security system had been hacked, and the live stream was still running. Together, we contacted a cybersecurity expert, who confirmed that the system had been breached through a software vulnerability. The hacker had gained access to the cameras and redirected the live feed to online platforms. The cybersecurity expert worked to shut down the unauthorized access while the police began their investigation. They traced the hack to an IP address, but the perpetrator's identity remained unclear. The breach left us all feeling violated. Mark and Lisa had to deal with the fallout, including the exposure of their private moments. They replaced their security system and worked with authorities and cybersecurity experts to track down the hacker. The experience also affected me deeply, serving as a reminder of how vulnerable we are in the digital age. It highlighted the importance of protecting our privacy and securing our connected devices. Though Mark and Lisa were able to restore their sense of security, the incident left us all with an enduring lesson on the risks of modern technology. Story 11. I had always valued the peaceful solitude of living alone in my small apartment. It was a place that reflected who I was, filled with mementos from my travels, cherished books, and the comforting rhythm of my daily routines. It was my sanctuary, a space where I could unwind and be myself without anyone intruding. But that sense of safety was shattered in ways I never expected. It started off subtly. At first, I brushed it off as my imagination running wild. I noticed small things out of place. My favorite mug, usually left on the kitchen counter, was found in the living room. My bookshelves had been rearranged, and a few items on my desk had been shifted. I convinced myself it was just absent-mindedness or the result of a busy life, but the strange occurrences continued. I began to find things in odd spots, my car keys in the fridge, my wallet on the bathroom sink. It felt as though someone had been in my apartment, moving things around, even though I was always alone when I returned home. I double-checked the locks, convincing myself I was just being paranoid. The thought that someone could be entering my home without my knowledge was unnerving. One evening, as I was making dinner, I noticed something else. The front door, which I always locked behind me, seemed slightly ajar. I double-checked the lock, making sure it was secure, and tried to dismiss it as a simple oversight on my part. But the unease lingered. That night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone might be entering my apartment while I was away. A few days later, I came home to an even more alarming discovery. My bedroom door, which I always kept closed, was slightly open. Inside, my personal items appeared disturbed. Drawers that were once neatly organized were now askew, and some things were out of place. My heart raced as I tried to make sense of it all. I had no idea who could be doing this or how they were getting in. Determined to find out, I began taking precautions. I locked my bedroom door when I wasn't home, and I double-checked all windows and doors before leaving. I also set up a small camera in my living room to monitor any unusual activity. I hoped the surveillance would provide answers. The first night the camera recorded, there was nothing unusual. I watched the footage with anticipation, hoping to find a clue, but everything appeared normal, just the usual quiet of my empty apartment. No sign of anyone coming or going. The following days blurred together with tension, and every time I returned home, I checked the footage and examined my belongings, hoping to find something that explained the disturbances. Eventually, I noticed something odd. While reviewing the camera footage one evening, there was a brief flicker of movement before the camera went dark for a few seconds. It was subtle but noticeable. As I zoomed in on the spot, I saw a shadowy figure quickly passing through the camera's field of view. My heart skipped a beat. There was someone in my apartment, but they were careful to avoid being clearly seen. I decided to take action. I contacted my landlord and asked them to check the building's security, and I shared the footage with the police. They took my concerns seriously and promised to investigate, though they advised me to remain cautious and continue with my security measures. I changed all the locks, installed a more advanced security system, and added extra cameras to cover blind spots. I also started keeping a log of any unusual occurrences, hoping that documenting everything would help the authorities with their investigation. Despite these efforts, the disturbances continued, though they became less frequent. The feeling of being watched and the violation of my privacy never quite went away. The police investigation yielded no conclusive results, and the identity of the intruder remained unknown. This experience left a lasting mark on me. My apartment, once my peaceful retreat, became a source of anxiety. I learned to be more vigilant about my security and to take steps to protect my privacy. The ordeal made me realize how easily our sense of safety can be shattered by an unseen intruder. Over time, I found ways to regain a sense of security, continuously monitoring my apartment and staying alert to any changes in my environment. Though the memory of the invasion lingered, I adapted, learning to safeguard my personal space and maintain control over my home. Story 12. It was a typical Tuesday afternoon when the first letter arrived. I was in the middle of preparing dinner, the smell of garlic and herbs filling the air, when I heard a soft thud at the door. I opened it to find a handful of envelopes and a small parcel, among the usual bills and advertisements. One envelope stood out. It was plain, unmarked, and had no return address. A flicker of unease ran through me, but I dismissed it as just another piece of junk mail. That evening, curiosity got the best of me, and I opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a typed message that read, "I see everything you do. You're never alone." The words sent a chill down my spine, but I initially shrugged it off as a prank or someone's misguided attempt at humor. I crumpled the note and tossed it aside, deciding not to lose sleep over it. The next day brought more mail. I sifted through the pile, finding another envelope. This time, it contained a photograph of my house, taken from a distance. The image showed my front yard, and it was dated from a week earlier. The note accompanying the photo was handwritten and read, "I've been watching you for a while. Nice garden." My heart raced as I processed the implications. This wasn't a prank. Someone had been observing my home and sending unsettling messages. I showed the note and the photo to the police, and they promised to investigate, but without more evidence, they said it would be difficult to track down the sender. Despite their efforts, the strange mail continued. Each letter was more disturbing than the last. One contained a series of photographs of me leaving my house at different times of the day. They had clearly been taken from nearby, and the note read, "I know your routines. It's fascinating to see how predictable you are." The feeling of being watched grew stronger, and I became hyper-aware of my surroundings. I changed my routines, varied my schedule, and even parked in different spots, hoping to throw off whoever was tracking me. But the letters kept coming. One envelope contained a collage of images from my life, photos of my workplace, my favorite coffee shop, and even a picture of me at the park with friends. The note that accompanied the collage was chilling, "I enjoy your company. You have no idea how much I know about you." The fear and paranoia deepened. I scrutinized every detail of my life, looking for vulnerabilities. I ensured my home security was in top shape, locked my car, and started documenting every letter and note. I even installed additional locks on doors and windows, hoping to regain some sense of safety. The police continued their investigation, but progress was slow. They traced some of the mail to a local post office, but there were no leads on the sender's identity. Then came a letter that was different from the rest, a video. It was grainy footage of me sleeping in my bedroom, taken from a distance. The sight of myself in such a vulnerable state was terrifying. The accompanying note simply said, "I'm always watching." I hired a private security firm, installed motion sensor lights, and continued to live in a state of constant vigilance. The psychological toll was immense. I withdrew from social interactions and spent most of my time at home, where I felt safest. Eventually, the frequency of the disturbing mail decreased, and the last few letters were less threatening, more vague. It seemed the sender was losing interest or becoming more cautious. The police investigation remained open, but the case was never solved. The experience left me with a lingering sense of unease, and I became more cautious about my privacy and personal safety. I learned the hard way how deeply invasions of privacy can affect your sense of security. Though the immediate threat subsided, the shadow of being watched never fully lifted. Story 13. It began with a phone call late one night, just as I was about to go to bed. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize. When I answered, there was silence on the other end. I assumed it was a wrong number or a telemarketer and hung up. The next night, the same number called again, and I let it ring. By the third call, I was starting to feel uneasy. When I finally answered, a distorted voice rasped, "I know your darkest secrets, and I'll make sure everyone else does too, unless you follow my instructions." I was stunned, my mind racing with possible explanations. The voice didn't give me much time to react before hanging up abruptly. I tried to brush it off as a prank or an attempt to scare me. But the calls kept coming, each one more unnerving than the last. The voice became more specific, mentioning things about my life that I had never shared with anyone. They knew about my past relationships, my struggles at work, and my insecurities. Each call was accompanied by a demand, sometimes trivial, other times more unsettling. The first demand was simple: meet me at the old bridge at midnight and bring $200. Hesitant but fearful, I complied, but when I arrived, no one was there. The voice taunted me later, threatening severe consequences if I didn't comply next time. As the days passed, I grew increasingly paranoid. The calls continued, each one delivering more specific threats and demands. The voice would instruct me to perform odd tasks, such as leaving a package in a specific location or making small, seemingly innocent purchases. One evening, the voice sounded quieter, almost sympathetic. "I know this is hard, but it's the only way. Keep following my instructions or your secrets will be exposed." The torment pushed me to contact the authorities. The police took it seriously and managed to trace the number to a disposable phone, but that didn't provide any leads. They advised me to keep documenting everything and to stay cautious. I was on edge, second-guessing every decision, changing my routines, and being careful not to share personal information. Eventually, the calls stopped, but the lingering fear remained. I had taken steps to protect myself, but the experience had left a deep scar. I had learned to protect my privacy, trust cautiously, and remain vigilant in the face of fear. Though the calls ceased, the uncertainty of the identity behind them haunted me. The experience was a reminder of how easily someone can invade your life and manipulate your sense of safety. Story 14. The realization that someone had copied my house keys and was entering my home without my knowledge was a nightmare that unfolded gradually, almost imperceptibly. It started with small, unsettling incidents that I initially dismissed, but over time they coalesced into a pattern that revealed a disturbing breach of my security. It all began one chilly autumn evening when I returned home after working late. My front door, which I always locked behind me, was slightly ajar. I thought I might have simply forgotten to lock it, or maybe the lock malfunctioned. I quickly shut the door and locked it again, making a mental note to have the lock checked. The following week, however, I noticed more signs that something was wrong. Items in my home seemed out of place. A picture frame on the mantel was crooked, and a book I distinctly remembered leaving on the coffee table was now on the bookshelf. Though I was unsettled, I told myself it was just forgetfulness or imagination. But one particularly cold December evening, things took a more sinister turn. I came home to find my living room window wide open, the chill in the air unmistakable. The curtain was swaying gently. Panic surged through me as I rushed inside to check for anything stolen or tampered with. Thankfully, nothing seemed missing, but the violation was undeniable. I decided to take action. I changed the locks on all my doors to ensure no one had a duplicate key. I also installed a security system with hidden cameras inside my home to monitor for any unusual activity. I hoped that the new measures would reassure me. For a while, things seemed better. The new locks and cameras made me feel safe again. But just when I thought I could relax, a new and disturbing pattern emerged. One evening, I received a notification from my security app showing footage from one of the cameras in the living room. The timestamp showed that I had been home, and the footage captured a figure moving quickly in and out of view, too quick for the camera to catch details. It was a person, but I could not tell who it was. Story 15. After weeks of exhausting work, the hotel felt like a much-needed escape. I chose it for its mix of comfort and convenience, and the reviews promised a peaceful stay. The lobby was elegant, the staff warm and welcoming, and my room was perfect, cozy with a spacious bathroom. I was eager to relax in my temporary sanctuary. The first few days were uneventful. I worked during the day, explored the city at night, and occasionally dined at the hotel's restaurant. Everything seemed perfect, and I felt relief every time I returned to my room. One evening, after a particularly long day, I decided to unwind with a hot bath. I filled the tub with warm water, added some scented bubbles, and settled in, enjoying the comfort. The bathroom was well lit, clean, and modern, complete with plush towels. As I relaxed, something caught my eye, a small black dot on the counter between the soap dish and a bottle of shampoo. At first, I thought it was just part of the decor. But as I looked closer, I realized it was a hidden camera, discreetly placed in the corner of the room. My heart raced as panic set in. I quickly wrapped myself in a towel and inspected the camera. It was mounted in a corner, barely noticeable unless you were looking for it. I felt deeply violated, realizing someone had secretly been recording me in such an intimate space. I knew I had to act fast, but my mind was racing with questions. How long had this been happening? Had anyone else been filmed? After gathering my thoughts, I carefully removed the camera and examined it. It appeared to be a small, battery-operated device with a built-in memory card. I took photos of it for documentation before wrapping it up in a towel and heading to the front desk. At first, the staff didn't believe me, but once they saw the camera, they were visibly shocked. The manager, clearly distressed, assured me they'd handle the situation immediately and contacted local authorities. While waiting for the police, I felt a mix of anger and dread. How many other guests had been secretly filmed? The hotel offered to move me to another room and even gave me a complimentary stay, but their gestures felt hollow in light of such a severe breach. When the authorities arrived, they took the camera and started their investigation, asking about my stay and any unusual occurrences. They discovered that the hidden camera was part of a much larger surveillance operation, with devices installed in several rooms of the hotel, all linked to a central storage system. It turned out that a former hotel employee, using their knowledge of the hotel's layout and security system, had orchestrated the setup to satisfy their voyeuristic desires. The police identified several other victims and used the footage as evidence to press charges against the perpetrator. The hotel's management cooperated fully, but the damage was done. The investigation revealed a disturbing level of exploitation, and the hotel's reputation was forever tarnished. Though the legal process was ongoing, the emotional toll on me was profound. It took time to process the violation, and I was offered counseling from the hotel and local authorities. In the aftermath, the hotel implemented stricter security measures and reviewed their privacy policies to ensure such a breach never happened again. For me, this experience was a harsh reminder of the vulnerabilities we face in our personal lives. It took time to rebuild my sense of security, and I became more vigilant about protecting my privacy in an increasingly connected world. The ordeal served as a reminder of the complexities of trust and privacy in today's society. Story 16. It started with small, unsettling incidents, things that seemed too strange to ignore. At first, it was nothing more than an unexpected package from an online store I didn't remember ordering from. Inside, I found a set of high-end headphones. I brushed it off, thinking it was either a promotional gift or a mix-up. But soon after, I noticed strange charges on my credit card for subscriptions and services I had no knowledge of. I assumed it was a mistake, until I received a call from my bank. They alerted me to unusual activity on my account, and I realized someone had been trying to access my funds and make withdrawals. I assured them I hadn't made any such transactions, but the warning was clear. The bank advised me to keep a close eye on my account, and I did. Then, I began to notice more alarming signs, dozens of password reset emails for accounts I hadn't requested, and soon, I found myself locked out of several accounts. The breaking point came when I received a notification from a social media platform I rarely used. It said someone had logged into my account from an unfamiliar device. Panic set in as I realized my accounts were being compromised. When I tried to log in, I found my password had been changed, along with the recovery options. Desperate for answers, I reached out to customer service for all the platforms involved, but recovering my accounts was slow and frustrating. Determined to get to the bottom of it, I started reviewing my activities and communications. The more I dug, the more disturbing patterns emerged. I noticed that fraudulent activity often occurred when I was away from home, suggesting someone had been tracking my movements. Then, I discovered that my personal information, including my name, address, and even my social security number, had been used to open new accounts and services in my name. I contacted the authorities, and a detective was assigned to my case. Together, we pieced together the puzzle. The detective explained that identity theft often involved multiple methods: phishing, data breaches, and even physical theft. The investigation revealed that my information had been compromised during a data breach at a company I had previously done business with. The perpetrator also used social engineering tactics to gain access to my accounts. Recovering my identity was a long and exhausting process. I worked with financial institutions to reverse fraudulent charges and restore my credit. I strengthened my security by changing passwords, enabling two-factor authentication, and monitoring my credit. Despite some progress with the authorities, the emotional impact lingered. The experience left me deeply shaken, making me more aware of the need to protect my personal information. As time passed, I became more vigilant, constantly aware of the potential for identity theft. Although the legal proceedings were ongoing, the lessons I learned about safeguarding my information became invaluable. It was a sobering reminder of how fragile privacy can be, and how far some individuals will go to exploit it. Story 17. It was a typical morning: coffee brewed, emails checked, and a glance at the daily news. Everything seemed normal until I opened the door and found a small, unremarkable package on the doorstep. It was a plain brown box with no labels or markings. Curious but unconcerned, I brought it inside, thinking it might be a forgotten order. As I opened it, I discovered a stack of photographs. What I initially thought was a surprise quickly turned into a deep sense of unease. The photos were of me and my family, taken from various angles and settings, places that were clearly private. There were images of my children playing in the backyard, a candid shot of my wife and me walking, and even some taken inside our home. The unsettling part was that I didn't remember anyone taking these pictures. The images seemed to capture moments from our private lives, and the realization that someone had been watching us for some time made my heart race. I immediately called my wife, my voice trembling as I explained what I found. She was understandably alarmed, and we decided to contact the authorities. The police arrived within the hour and began examining the photographs. They asked about any suspicious activities or individuals, assuring us they would investigate, though they warned it might take time to identify the culprit. As they left, I felt helpless. Our privacy had been invaded in a deeply unsettling way. In the following days, we took extra security measures, installing motion-activated lights, setting up a security camera system, and reinforcing all windows and doors. Despite these steps, the sense of unease didn't go away. We received calls and messages from concerned friends and neighbors, and the police kept us updated, though there were no new leads. Months passed before we received another call from the police. They had traced the photographs to a former neighbor who had been secretly using hidden cameras to monitor several homes in the neighborhood, including ours. The individual had been caught and was facing charges of invasion of privacy and stalking. While the news brought relief, it also brought a flood of emotions. The violation was still fresh, and knowing that someone had been spying on us for so long was deeply troubling. In the aftermath, my family and I became more vigilant about our privacy and more proactive in protecting our home. We also became advocates for greater awareness of home security and the need to protect one's personal space. The experience served as a reminder of how vulnerable we can be in an interconnected world and reinforced the importance of taking steps to protect ourselves and our families from unwanted intrusions. Story 18. It all started with small misunderstandings, confusing texts, unclear messages, that I initially brushed off. But as the pattern continued, I realized something was wrong. The first sign came one weekend when my mother seemed unusually distant. Our relationship had always been close, so I was troubled by her evasiveness. When I reached out to ask if everything was okay, she mentioned a misunderstanding but didn't elaborate. The next day, my best friend Sarah confronted me with a similar issue. She was upset about something I supposedly said in an email, but I had no memory of sending such a message. Her frustration grew, and despite my efforts to clarify, the rift between us deepened. Finally, my partner Alex brought up a series of emails he'd seen, accusing me of being distant and inconsiderate. I was bewildered. How had things gotten so out of hand? The emails were the common thread, but I didn't remember sending them. The content portrayed me in a negative light, causing conflict with people I cared about. It dawned on me that my emails were being intercepted and altered. I checked my email account for signs of tampering, but everything appeared normal at first. Then I contacted my email provider, and they confirmed that there had been unusual login attempts and discovered email forwarding rules I hadn't set up. My account had been compromised, and my emails were being manipulated. I immediately changed my passwords, enabled two-factor authentication, and worked with the support team to secure my account. I also reached out to my mother, Sarah, and Alex to explain the situation, showing them evidence of the tampered emails. Rebuilding trust was difficult, but I was determined to fix the damage caused by this intrusion. The emotional toll was significant. It took time to repair relationships and regain trust. Along the way, I learned valuable lessons about digital security and became more cautious about my online presence. I sought professional advice and became proactive in protecting my accounts. Though my relationships began to heal, the psychological impact lingered. The experience had made me more guarded, and I often second-guessed my communications. Over time, I regained a sense of normalcy, but the breach left its mark. The process of recovery, of betrayal, confusion, and eventual resilience, reinforced my commitment to protecting my privacy and advocating for stronger awareness of digital security. The experience served as a harsh reminder of the vulnerabilities in our digital lives and the need to stay vigilant against potential threats. Story 19. It was a quiet Wednesday afternoon when the first envelope arrived, slipping into my mailbox unnoticed amidst the usual bills and flyers. It was plain, unmarked, except for my name written in neat, unfamiliar handwriting. I brought it inside, curious but not overly concerned. Perhaps it was an invitation or just a marketing piece. But what I found inside unsettled me. The letter described a dinner party I had hosted 2 weekends earlier, capturing the evening in eerie detail, the menu, the guests, the conversations, even personal anecdotes and inside jokes shared among friends. The final line read, "It seems your guests had quite the enjoyable evening. Hope it was memorable for you too." I was taken aback. The accuracy of the details felt invasive, but I brushed it off as an elaborate prank or some social experiment. Maybe someone had overheard things or seen a post on social media. I convinced myself that it was harmless. But then the second letter arrived just a week later, and it was even more unsettling. This time, it described my daily routines in detail. It mentioned my morning habits, the route I took during my jogs, the time I left for work, the coffee shop I frequented, even the grocery store I visited on weekends. The letter concluded with a cryptic remark: "Your routine seems quite well structured." It must be comforting to have such predictability. I couldn't ignore it any longer. The letter made it clear that someone was watching me. I checked my home for signs of tampering or surveillance equipment, but everything seemed normal. My phone and computer didn't show any signs of unusual activity. Still, the letters kept coming. Each one seemed to dig deeper into my personal life, describing conversations with colleagues, details of a medical appointment, and even arguments I'd had at work. The mounting anxiety was unbearable. I started to wonder if someone was following me or had somehow gained access to my private information. Desperate for answers, I contacted the police. They took me seriously, but there were no concrete clues about the sender. The officer advised me to stay vigilant and to keep track of any suspicious activity. I followed their advice, varying my routine, changing jogging routes, using different coffee shops, and installing additional security cameras at home. Yet the letters kept arriving. I hired a private investigator, Laura, who immediately took action. She interviewed my neighbors, colleagues, and anyone who might have access to my life. She also analyzed my digital devices for signs of hacking. As the investigation progressed, Laura noticed a pattern: the information was collected over time, suggesting the sender had been monitoring me for months. She eventually traced the source to a former acquaintance who had a job requiring access to personal data and had a history of invasive behavior. This person had been using their resources to track me, driven by resentment and a desire for control. The authorities apprehended the individual, and their motives were rooted in personal grievances. Although the case was resolved, it left me shaken. I felt violated, paranoid, and unsafe in my own home. But eventually, the letters stopped. I took measures to rebuild my sense of security, continuing to work with Laura to enhance my privacy. The experience taught me the importance of safeguarding personal information and trusting my instincts when something feels off. While unsettling, it also reminded me of the value of resilience and seeking help in times of crisis. Story 20. It was a warm autumn afternoon when I first noticed the car. The sun was dipping low, casting long shadows across the neighborhood. I was outside, tending to the garden when I saw it, a weathered sedan parked across the street, partially hidden by overgrown bushes. At first, I thought it was an abandoned vehicle. Its rusty body, dings, and faded paint made it look like it had been sitting there for years. Still, something about it felt off. It remained there for days, untouched, and my curiosity began to grow. It had no license plates, and the fogged windows made it hard to see inside. One afternoon, while I was working in the yard, I decided to take a closer look. As I peered inside, I saw clutter, empty coffee cups, crumpled fast food wrappers, and old newspapers. It seemed like someone had been using the car as a makeshift shelter or storage. I opened the driver's side door, which creaked as I did, and stepped inside. The musty air filled my nose. On the passenger seat, I noticed a worn-out backpack. Curiosity got the better of me, and I opened it. Inside were personal belongings, an old wallet, some clothes, and a small leather journal. Hesitating for only a moment, I flipped through the journal, and my heart sank. The pages were filled with meticulous, handwritten entries detailing daily routines and observations. At first, it seemed innocent: grocery shopping, errands. But as I read further, I realized that the journal contained detailed accounts of my own life. It noted the exact times I left for work, the routes I took, and even the interactions I had with neighbors. It was clear that someone had been watching me closely. The violation was overwhelming. I knew I had to act. I closed the journal, placed it back in the backpack, and called the authorities. The police arrived soon after and conducted a thorough examination of the vehicle. They took note of the personal items in the journal, documenting everything for their investigation. The officers were understanding, but they expressed concern about the implications of what I had discovered. They advised me to stay vigilant and take extra precautions. I installed additional lighting around my home, increased the neighborhood watch, and reviewed my security system. I also warned my neighbors, urging them to be cautious. Weeks passed, but the police investigation didn't yield many answers. The car remained a constant reminder of the invasion of my privacy. It had become a symbol of the hidden dangers that can lurk in the most unexpected places. The emotional toll lingered, and while the immediate threat was addressed, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. This experience taught me how important it is to stay aware and protect your privacy, as threats can come from the most unlikely places. The journal and the abandoned car had exposed a reality I could never forget: privacy is fragile, and vigilance is necessary.